Hi, good afternoon, General Stilwell. So it's welcome to join us.
Good to be here.
Before we start, I would like to introduce you briefly to my audience in Chinese. I know your Chinese is very good, so you know that I'm not making anything up. 各位观众朋友，大家好。现在呢，我们采访的是大卫·史迪威将军呢，他呢是负责东亚和太平洋事务局的助理国务卿。在2019年6月20号被任命为助理国务卿之前，他在空军服役了35年的时间。从1980年的时候开始，就在韩国呀，后来就是又在日本，都曾经服过役。他在2015年的时候以准将的军衔退休，担任了这个参谋长联席会议主席的亚洲顾问。他是一个语言学家啊，他也是一个战斗机的飞行员啊，是一个 pilot， 同时呢也是一个司令啊，在这个日本跟韩国多次服役。我说的对吗？准确吗？Am I right？
对呀。
So， 他在这个2011年到2013年之间，曾经做过这个美国驻华大使馆的国防专员。然后后来呢，就是他讲一口流利的韩语和汉语，然后呢还能讲少量的日语，当然他的英文是最好的。Okay, so that's the end of my introduction. It's so nice to have you. You have been doing a lot of work on Sino-U.S. relationship. It seems that the relationship between China and the U.S. is one of the most important relationships in this world. A couple of days ago, I read a very interesting article on foreign policy. The title was, If Russia Invades Ukraine, Sanction China. Putin has found an economic lifeline in Beijing that only Washington can destroy. So that's the title of the article opinion article on foreign policy. So the question is like, although it's a crisis between Ukraine and Russia, in Chinese we have a saying called 躺枪. So basically it means you will get shot. You will get shot even if you have already laid down. The bystander will also suffer when two people are fighting. So first of all, the perception on China has been going down drastically, according to Gallup poll. And unfavorable perception now has reached 79%. So why is that?
Well, that's a big question. I guess I'll just hit a couple points. As you mentioned, we were in the embassy 2011, 2013. We were there for the Chen Guangcheng escape. We're also there for the Shibada. And so that, after Hu Jintao, 10 years, the relationship seemed stale. And when I was sent to Beijing, my job was to get the People's Liberation Army to actually seriously engage on safety measures and things to make sure that there were no crises or conflict. But they wouldn't talk to us. So when Xi Jinping came to power in 2012, 2013, we were very hopeful, and there was room for hope. There were a number of things that changed when he arrived. But within 6 months, we knew it was actually worse than it was with Hu Jintao. Hu Jintao was status quo. Xi Jinping was actually moving things back in the opposite direction, back toward the Mao days, and you could see it coming a long time ago. And so if you asked about why the relationship between the US government and the Chinese government is so difficult right now, it's an important point. The relationship with the US people and the Chinese people hasn't changed. We still feel very warm feelings for them. And I'll tell you stories later if you want about my travels in China as the defense attaché and otherwise. I mean, I still have lots of people I consider sincere, real friends from that time. But what we changed the language at State Department back in 2019 to start saying the Communist Party and the government of China and not saying China or the Chinese people. Because as you know, you have the government, but then you have all the people, and the government does not reflect the will of the people. If they did, they would allow elections. They don't care about the will of the people. They dictate to the people and to the world how things are going to be, and that's a problem. So I want to be very clear that the relationship between the American people and the Chinese people has not changed at all. In fact, it's probably stronger because we feel very sorry for China today compared to what it was when I was there just 10 years ago. It's so much different now. It's scary.
So one thing I'm very curious about is that when you served in U.S. Embassy in Beijing in 2012, you mentioned Chen Guangcheng, you mentioned the inauguration of Xi Jinping to be head of the party. So did you happen to know any anecdote to share with us about Wang Lijun and Bo Xilai. I guess that was a huge event, that's basically changed the landscape of the politics in China.
Probably the best resource for that, I'll tell you a quick story, but the best resource for that is a book by John Garnaut, Garnaut, and it's called The Rise and Fall of the House of Bo. And it is a very telling story about the internal politics in the PRC and the rise of Xi Jinping. And you compare that to Desmond Shum's recent book called Red Roulette, and the two books are very complementary. They tell you the same story, whether it's Wen Jiabao or Bo Xilai or Xi Jinping. So if you want all the details, that's where you'll find them. There's also a movie out there called Laundromat, I think is the name of it, with I can't think of the name. I'll send you a link to it. There's a little short snippet in that movie that talks about the murder of Neil,
the British businessman, huh?
Neil, whatever his name was. Yeah, and Gu Kailai is shown not very faithfully.
Poisoned the person. Yeah. She poisoned the person.
We watched it from a distance in the Beijing embassy. Obviously, it was taking place in the Chengdu consulate, where I spent a lot of time, by the way. In fact, of all the places I spent time in outside of Beijing, I spent the most of it in Chengdu, doing the Stillwell Road, the World War II history. We were all just baffled. We had no idea what was going on. At first we thought he was defecting to the US, and then it became apparent that he was actually running for his life. He was scared that Gu Kailai was going to come after him and kill him. And so what he asked the United States government for was just safe passage to Beijing, where he had at least, he's going to go to court for what he did. He's going to go to jail or whatever, but at least he wasn't going to die. I never thought of the party as being so murderous. I always thought it was kind of a mild version of the Russians or the Soviets. But if you look at, the Desmond Shum book or these others, in China, they die of car wrecks, right? He mysteriously died in a car accident. In Russia, they die of mysterious poisoning. But they're being killed nonetheless.
So, I'm not trying to brag about myself. So when this thing happened, when Wang Lijun entered the Chengdu consulate, that was February the 6th. And then it became suddenly a breaking news on the next day. And then within a week, I point out that Bo Xilai will be down. At that time, it was highly speculative. And then I said, I predicted that Bo Xilai will be probably in big trouble, even arrested during the People's Congress in March. I guess that was the best time to arrest him because he has to appear in Beijing. And then before that, even before the Bo Xilai was arrested, I also predicted that Zhou Yongkang will be in trouble and he probably will follow Bo Xilai's path to prison. That was also in February 2012. So, and then 2 years later, Zhou Yongkang was down. So there are a lot of things in the very high level in the Politburo, a lot of power struggle. And then you can see Communist Party is just not one party. It has different factions, they fight with each other. And especially now, for Xi Jinping, a lot of people say that he will get his third term. But I feel like there was a kind of very strong force inside the party that are against Xi Jinping. One of them is probably some of the people who follow the Jiang Zemin and Bo Xilai. Basically, this is one faction, and they are really hating. They are really against Xi Jinping because a lot of people in this group were arrested and basically purged. And another group of people who are against Xi Jinping is the people who follow Deng Xiaoping's path. So they probably want to have reform, they want to have the openness. So basically they feel like in that climate, they can make money, they can make easy money. But now Xi Jinping is trying to shut down China, trying to decouple with the world. And then you can see the diplomacy in China is very strange. So it's not like a diplomacy, it's like they call themselves wolf warrior, right? They are trying to scare they try to bully some small countries and they try to scare the big countries, even like the United States. So I guess a lot of people disagree with this. So I assume, before the 20th Party Congress, Xi Jinping will see a lot of, I cannot say coup or insurrection, but he will see a lot of challenge, just as in 2012, he was challenged by some factions in the party. So this is just my personal opinion, probably speculation, you can see.
I think you're right. It sure seems like you can't have gone from what was a really productive relationship in 2012. When I was there, we were eager to share military information with the PRC in hopes that they would learn to like us. And in 5 years, he had turned that around. If you remember Hangzhou, when we had the G20 summit with President Obama and they wouldn't get him the stairs for his airplane. And it took the previous administration, the Obama crew, a long time to figure it out, but they eventually learned that you can't be nice to these people. You have to be hard and firm. And that was what I learned from my time in Beijing, in the Pentagon and beyond, is that, dealing with the Chinese people is one thing, but dealing with the CCP requires force. It's the one thing they understand is force.
The only force.
Don't apologize. Don't try to be nice. Just come in and do what you think is right and then make them react. And I think we did a good job of doing that. Last thing on that, as far as pressure inside Beijing, we think of the Ukraine issue, and I hear lots of people saying that Russia and China are, lips and teeth on the Ukraine. Absolutely not. Remember in 2014, China did not vote in favor of Russia. They didn't vote against, but they abstained in the UN Security Council on condemnation of the Russian invasion of Crimea and Ukraine. And we know China has strong feelings about this, Bugansha Nejam policy, where invading other countries, that's what China's past is very detrimental to, the Chinese government and others. But here's another one that's interesting. You mentioned the stress inside. There is no stress that's going to be harder to deal with than economic. And Ukraine, look what the Ukraine, just the threat of war is doing to the American stock market and other stock markets. Money is just vaporizing. It's just in a serious decline. And that's going to hurt China most. It's going to hurt the economy, and they're going to blame Xi Jinping for aligning so closely with Russia. So I think, and you're starting to see it, Wang Yi made a statement yesterday. It was actually saying, hey, let's stop all the military stuff and get back to dialogue. And he was sincere, because if this invasion continues, it's going to hurt China economically badly, and Xi Jinping will get blamed for it.
Right. I guess China is trying to, a lot of world leaders said that China is trying to work with Russia to have a new order of this world. So basically, they are challenging the status quo. But I really don't feel that. In my personal opinion, although the media are quite, it's like a hot topic of the Ukraine crisis. Personally, maybe I'm wrong. I really don't feel like there's any reason for Russia to take over Ukraine, because in that case, it's really a threat to them. They are getting too close to NATO. I think Ukraine can be a buffer zone between the NATO and Russia, so that both sides may feel safe. And also, if Russia is heavily sanctioned, and then there's not much China can do, because China will be the secondary sanction. I guess basically whoever doing business with Russia can also be sanctioned. In that case, I believe Communist Party will back down. This is just what we saw in Hong Kong when they sanctioned Lam, Carrie Lam, the lady, the SAR, the head of the SAR, Hong Kong SAR. And then almost every bank, including Bank of China, refused to open an account for her, because otherwise they will be sanctioned. So I guess as long as you said, strength is the only language they can understand. As long as United States can show a tough position, I think CCP will back down. That's for sure. But one thing, I think there's quite several leverages that we haven't been using. I think they could be very, very helpful for us. One thing is about the pandemic. I guess just now, as you said, the relationship between Chinese people and the United States people were not changed, but the government, the relationship between two governments changed. But the Gallup poll showed that the unfavorable perception from the people in the United States, they view China unfavorably, and this rate is 79%. I guess it's very hard for an average American to separate Chinese people from Communist Party. So I guess this is something we can educate them. But one thing I think, like if you see the chart from the Gallup poll, you can see the unfavorable rate increase, parabolically in 2020, because of the pandemic, because people know something happened in China and they're trying to cover it up, and then it became suddenly a disaster for the whole world. I read an article from New York Times. Basically, they republished data from the Nature magazine. They said if China could have reduced the total number they said China could have reduced the total number of cases by 66% had officials acted a week earlier.
Right.
And action 3 weeks earlier could have dropped the caseload by 95%. So basically, we can see that because of the inaction or inactivity or covering up from the Chinese Communist Party, it became a world disaster. So I think, although we are not quite sure where the virus is from, it could be naturally developed. It can be leaked from Wuhan lab. So I know that we cannot reach consensus on that. But why do we stop holding CCP accountable for covering up the pandemic and force them to pay for the damage?
So that's coming, but by the way, I mean, the U.S. has nothing if not the best legal system in the world, as in we have the most lawyers per capita. And so all these lawyers are seeing a chance to get their teeth into it. So there are lawsuits in work right now for negligence in allowing this pandemic to leave. I am 100% sure. You made your predictions about Xi Jinping coming up, and I think those are informed decisions, and I agree with you on those. I guarantee you, 100%. Wuhan Institute of Virology. I mean, and our politics in this country are so toxic right now, starting for something years ago, that people would not admit the obvious because it would have agreed with something that former presidents said. I mean, if you think that the PRC is not conducting political warfare, using its influence operations inside the United States to make it more difficult for us to agree with each other, then people are missing the point. This is an easy form of warfare that they can conduct to keep the U.S. weak and squabbling and fighting each other versus looking outside and dealing with real threats. And this goes to the Wuhan virus, right? We started calling it the Wuhan virus not because we don't like Chinese people or whatever, because that's what the Chinese people called it, Wuhan Bingdu.
Right.
And so why not call it what they called it? And then you see that the Communist Party worked with the World Health Organization, this guy Tedros, and he got them to quickly turn it into this COVID-19 name, which doesn't make any sense when you think about it. And look how long it took the World Health Organization to declare the pandemic a public health emergency of international concern, PHEIC, right? Every time they threatened to do it, Beijing would shriek and say, you can't do it, and start threatening them. And that delay, you mentioned the other study, 66% reduction. The delay of declaring this a pandemic, we knew it was a pandemic in January.
Right.
But the World Health Organization delaying that decision, again, cost lots and lots of lives. One more point on that. One reason the US had such a hard time dealing with the pandemic, March, April timeframe, was because we sent every bit of PPE, everything we could send to the PRC, to Wuhan, to contain this virus. There's two ways to handle a pandemic. One, and the best and really the only way, is containment. Keep it where it is. And the second, once it escapes, is called mitigation. The world is mitigating right now. China is mitigating. Look at Hong Kong, and now it's moving into Suzhou and other places. Once that virus is out, widespread, no amount of lockdowns are going to stop it. We, the world, Italy and others, sent a lot of equipment to the PRC, masks, breathers, all that stuff to try
right,
to
I know that. So
the virus inside Wuhan. And it seems to me, again, I can't prove this, but I think we will be able to prove it soon enough, intentionally let that virus leave Wuhan, not into the rest of China, but into the rest of the world. 22,000 Chinese tourists or travelers came to the United States every single day from about 15 January until we closed the borders in 31 January. This seems like it was, if not deliberate.
Intentional.
Yeah.